Hey, what's going on, guys? Bflattened here with a brand new video today. Today we're going to be covering the PvP starter guide. This is going to be for just very entry-level PvP players because I noticed that there's a lot of influx of new players and also people who are starting the season for the very first time. This is also going to be useful for when the new season kicks in about a month from now. Yeah, 23 days from now. So this is also going to be useful for people who are starting season 4 for the very first time. Let's go ahead and get right into it. There is an intermediate guide that's going to be coming as well. So if you're not exactly a beginner, the intermediate guide may be useful to you as well. So the very first thing that I want to cover in the fresh PvP beginner's guide is catching Tems and the value of them. So if you catch a Tem, let me go ahead and see if I can show you here really quick. Okay, so we have an occlurer over here. If you catch a Tem and you record it in your Tempedia, this also passes over from PvE to PvP as well. So you see how these circles are here? Those circles are going to indicate what is going to be super effective, what is going to be neutral damage, and what is going to be not very effective. If you see a green circle, it's effective. If you see a white circle, neutral. If you see a red circle, not very effective. So if you're looking for something to do that for you in PvP, catching them in PvE will also transfer over to PvP as well. So keep that in mind. To get into actual PvP strategies though, team balance is going to be a huge thing when it comes to how you're going to bring your team together. So team balance is going to be things that give you coverages, things that are going to be able to not have a global like Tem or type that's going to be effective against you. For example, this is one of the teams that I've been using here for a little while now. It has great coverage, it has good Tem choices, it hits a lot of different things that are pretty relevant onto the meta at the current moment. This thing has been really helpful. If you want to go ahead and build your own team, whether it be in Showdown or in pro teams, an easy way to do so is by two websites that I would suggest. I'm going to link them in the description as well, so go ahead and check those out. TemTem is a very good team builder website. It allows you to do the exact same thing that you do in game. You select your team of up to 8. Because in PvP you get 8 Tems, 2 of them get banned, you choose 5, 1 gets left behind. What is so good about TemTem though is you can see your team coverage here. So here you'll be able to see what your team covers. Here you'll be able to see what your team resistances are. Obviously I don't have anything inserted yet, but you'll be able to see what your team resistances are. Let's go ahead and just fill a couple of things really quick so it'll pop up. It'll be like a little chart or a list. So we'll just choose a couple moves really quick. Let's do Plague and Dust Vortex, sure. What else? How about a Platymus? And we'll do Aqua Bullet Hell and Venomous Claws. Okay, so we have a Nature, and we have Ground, and we have Water, and we have Poison. So let's go ahead and check our team coverages. So now we get to see that we have coverage for Crystal, we have coverage for Earth, we have Electric, we have Ground, and then the red squares are going to be things that we don't cover. And then of course for the Platymus as well, we cover Digi, we cover Ground, we cover Fire, we don't cover Electric, sorry. Neutral squares are going to be things that you're neutral against. Green squares are going to be things that you're effective against, and red squares are going to be things that you're not very effective against. Just like the green circles that I just showed you, that's what these are going to be here for. And then when we look at our team resistances as well, we also get to see modifiers as well. So the modifiers will tell us what we are strong against, what we're weak against, and what the actual modifiers of those are going to be. So 0.25 quarter damage, 0.5 half damage, 1 times is just going to be neutral, and 2 times is going to be 2 times effective, 4 times is going to be quad weakness. So that's going to be very helpful for building your team. You can also put your TVs in, which is another thing that is going to be covered in the intermediate guide by me specifically. But if you want to get a good start Tortonite's Garden is actually a really good starter for TVs. Let's go ahead and type in our Volpe again that we were just looking at. So there's Volpe here. This website was created by a couple of really good PvP players. These are very generic builds, so keep in mind that they're not going to be relative to your team directly, of course, but these are going to be having a little bit of description. They're going to have a TV guide here for what is going to be decent for the TEM itself. They also have a suggestion on movesets, so if you're ever wondering what movesets are good, that's something that you can use as well. Tortonite's Garden and TemTem will link in the description, so go ahead and check those out. Next up on our list, we have Synergies. Synergies are going to be very useful, and they're going to be a determining factor as to what is going to be changing the move itself. So for example, let's go ahead and take a look at Hellfire. Hellfire is, you use this with another fire tem, you'll be able to see the description of what the synergy does above it. So use it in combination with a fire ally. This technique inflicts extra damage and burns the rival team for 2 turns. So it also has additional prio as well. You'll be able to see the differences between not synergy and synergy. Not synergy is the one on the bottom, and synergy is going to be the one on top. So as you can see, it does do higher damage from 84 to 100. The prio also increases from 2 to 3 prio, which is very important. And also it burns both enemy tems for 2 turns. Status conditions is going to be something that I'm going to be covering in the intermediate guide as well. So if you want full coverage on that, I'm going to be going over that. But burn is very, very powerful in this game. So this is a great move to have for your hedge-in. Synergies are going to be, like I said, changing how moves play out. And ultimately, it makes them a lot better. For the most part, some synergies are just not really that great. But things like Hellfire, excellent move to have with the synergy there. Also with Mudrid, Crystal Deluge is also a really good one. That one doesn't have it. So for example, Mudrid's Crystal Deluge is going to be a huge one. So Crystal Deluge here, the damage doesn't change, the stamina doesn't change. However, the priority does change, and it also goes from isolation to also isolation and sleep. So you get an extra status condition and you get 1 extra prio for it. So Crystal Deluge with a mental ally is very, very useful. If you need to see what the synergy is needed, it'll also say the typing right in between both text box. So as you can see, it'll be right there for you. That's mental. Knowing the symbols is going to be helpful for you as well. Maybe a type chart to have handy on the side with you would be helpful. But yeah, that's with a mental ally. So another thing that's really, really useful that I think anybody can learn, this is not just for beginners, but I think anybody can learn this, the pick and ban phase. So like I was mentioning earlier, in the story you have 6 tems. In PvP, it's a little bit different. You bring 8 tems with you. As you can see here, you bring 8 tems with you. Your opponent is going to be periodically picking 2 of them to ban off. And then there's also going to be you choosing 5 in that timeline as well. You guys take turns banning and picking and choosing and things like that. You pick 5, you bring 8, 2 get banned, 1 gets left behind. So pick and ban is super important because it's going to decide how the entire game goes. The starting 2 tems, if you have a weakness, if you have a weak lead, it's going to determine and decipher how the game goes for the rest of the game. And also the back 3 tems are going to be super important as well because that's going to decide how the mid or late game is going to be decided as well. Pick ban is always something that's changing and always something that's relative to learn and know. You'll get more experience with that as you play more PvP games, but having some form of strategy for your opener, being able to cover your tems. So for example, with this one here, the nature coach likes to play with the Mastion. So now I get to cover water, nature, and then I also get to cover with fire and water as well. So I get to hit a lot of different Tems there. If one of my Tems get threatened here, the other one can take over and kind of threaten back. So it's very, very useful to have your allies helping each other out when it comes to the pick and ban phase. Synergies as well are also super duper helpful. Some people like to play synergies on leads. Some people like to play Dario. For example, you get autonomy, or even Shaolin with Welcomer. It allows you to get a dodge when you first enter in. The evasion is going to be very, very helpful for you on a start. It's a pretty decent lead for you to have. Pick and ban is something that you're going to pick up over time. So don't beat yourself up for it if it's something that's very challenging opening wise. It's something that everybody is learning all the time. The next thing, when you're in the battle itself, battle log is super duper helpful. So when your battle screen is up, I'm not in a PvP game right now, unfortunately, so I can't actually show what battle log looks like. But when you're in the match itself, say for example, this is my matchup here. There's two buttons that you can press when you're in a PvP game. One of them will bring up the chat, and right next to it will bring up the battle log. What that will display and show you is all of your Tems and all of their Tems. The reason why this is important to know is because it helps determine what Tems they have in the back, what Tems they might swap in. It could also be a good global display for if you want to attack one slot with both of your Tems. If they swap into it, maybe you can deal additional damage and catch them off guard. The battle log is a really good, it's kind of like a strategy guide in the battle itself. It allows you to think your moves over a little bit more precisely and more carefully, and over time, being able to know the battle log and the usefulness of it early, it'll definitely help out your flow of battles when you end up improving yourself more. So I would highly suggest using the battle log at all times before picking your moves. Prio and speed tiers are also going to be very important to know. So we talked about Crystal Deluge earlier. Let's go ahead and highlight Crystal Deluge one more time. Crystal Deluge is going to be very, very important for this kind of example, because Crystal Deluge with Synergy increases its priority from 2 to 3 prio. Now, the one thing to keep in mind is that priority, whether it be 1, 2, 3, ultra, low prio, that's not the turn order itself. So, for example, 3 prio will not always outspeed 2 prio no matter the speed tiers. What's important to know is that priority is a modifier for how fast something is going to go over something else. So 3 prio will not always outspeed 2 prio. If you use a 3 prio move on a very, very slow Tem, odds are that a very fast Tem at 2 prio is still going to outspeed it because the modifier is just not increased up to that point. So keep that in mind. That's also very, very important to know that 2 prio moves can outspeed 3 prio moves. It depends on the Tem and the TVs that are invested. That doesn't mean that 500 speed is going to be like ridiculously good, but it's important to know how fast things are and what your turn order is going to be. It's especially helpful when you know what your own turn order is going to be, because that can help determine what you can control at least before your opponents get to move. So knowing what your speed tiers are going to be are super duper helpful. The speed tiers themselves are going to determine how the battle basically goes. There's something called speed arrow as well. The blue side will always start with speed arrow. Say for example, there are 2 Tems that have the exact same speed and they use the exact same prio. The one player with the speed arrow will be the one that gets to move first. So the one with the speed arrow will get to move first. When speed arrow procs, the other player will get speed arrow for the next time. So if 2 Hedgens are on the field, which is a very common one for speed arrow, a lot of people like to play max speed, so 302. If I have speed arrow, my Hedgen will go first, and then my opponent will get speed arrow for the next turn. So then he'll get to move next on speed ties. Very, very important to know. Can determine battles. Priority is going to be a very, very important thing. Also, take a look at synergies as well, because some synergies will be able to change how the priority goes. So, for example, Generify actually will kill off priority, because some synergies will do that. Other synergies, like we've seen with the Crystal Deluge example, it'll increase priority. Hellfire, it increases priority, so super duper helpful to know. Crystal Dust here, if you get it with the Wind synergy, is ultra priority, so it's very, very fast, very, very good. Speed tiers are going to be huge in battles. Now, say for example, you have two Tems on your side of the field that are the exact same speed. So in the case that speed arrow does not happen because you can't speed arrow yourself, if two of your Tems have the exact same speed tie, the one on the left hand side will always be the one to go first. So always remember that too. If you decide to TV your Tems the exact same way for some reason, the one with the left hand side will always go first if they use the same priority and have the same speed tier. Orange will always get the speed arrow first, or sorry, blue will always get the speed arrow first, orange will not, and then they'll swap between them. So blue always gets it first. And I think that pretty much covers prio and speed tiers. Traits and gear are going to be a very important one as well. There are just going to be some pieces of gear that are going to be subjectively garbage on some Tems, and they're going to be amazing on some other Tems. For example, I really like Hand Fan on Tolkien because I get to choose the damage with Pyromaniac. Pyromaniac will increase my fire moves by 15%, and Hand Fan will increase my wind moves by 10%. So I get to have both of my moves getting their damage increased. Chamomile is pretty decent on Nesla, but Chamomile is actually pretty bad on Yukama, for example. The reason why I would say that, some people do play Yukama with Chamomile. The reason why I don't like Yukama with Chamomile is because if you have Turbo Choreography, which increases your speed if you use it non-synergy or synergy, Chamomile is a move, or is a gear, sorry, that removes stage changes, positive or negative. So you got to keep that in mind. Using this on a Tem that has a move that will give it dodge, or if it increases its own stats, like a raid bosser, Chamomile is going to be a bad choice for that Tem because it'll remove all those stat changes. You can't place evade on a Tem that's immune, so you got to keep in mind where you want to put your Chamomile. Traits are also going to be another very important thing. Nesla is a pretty good example of this. Electric Synthesize, if it gets hit with an electric moves, it heals. Its other one is Hydrologist, so it gets more increased water damage. Traits will be proccing up on the right-hand side of the battle screen, so it's important to know and keep track of what trait is which. If a gear has procced, that gear will show up next to the Tem in the battle log, which is something that we talked about earlier. That's another reason why battle log is important. However, traits do not appear in the battle log, so it's always good to keep track of what trait is what for which Tem, because some Tems actually have two traits that are really, really good for them. Some of them are just subjectively worse than others, like Going Away Gift and Gotta Go Fast on Hedgen. Most people will play Gotta Go Fast instead of Going Away Gift. Nesla can be interchangeable. Electric Synthesizer or Hydrologist are both really, really good for it. So paying attention to those are going to be super helpful as well, and also determine some games. I think that's a pretty good introduction to PvP as a starter guide. I do have plans for a intermediate guide that are going to be covering things like status conditions, TV training, what breakpoints are, and also covering like an actual battle itself. So I think that's going to be what's going to be covered in the intermediate guide. I hope this is a helpful guide for people who just want to get into PvP for the first time. If you have any questions, feel free to fire them away in the comments. I'll definitely answer to them. And the links that I showed earlier will be in the description, so you can build your own team from scratch from there. Other than that, my name is Bflattened, guys, and I'm signing on out of here. Take care, all. Laters.